Or Kyle, why don't you explain what we were trying to talk, well, what we were talking about yesterday about how Israel, I mean, I tried to bring it up before with Neil, but how Israel is incompliant with a lot of UN laws and other international law.
I'd be happy to. I can provide documentation for this as well, but there's a list of violations of the United Nations Security Council, which is, let's face it, the only body of the UN with any substantive power. A list of UN Security Council resolutions that Israel has violated, or specifically targeting either Israel or Zionists before the creation of the State of Israel, going all the way back to Resolution 57, September 18th to 1948, continuing to today. It's endless.
Right. Okay. And I mean, I was reading something online yesterday where it was actually saying the settlements are against UN law as well. Is that true?
The settlements are entirely against UN law. It's the Fourth Geneva Conventions, Article 49 states that it is illegal to move or transfer civilian population into areas that into occupied territory, and the entire West Bank is, by legal definition, occupied Palestinian territory. It's recognized as such by the overwhelming majority of the world, with absolutely no room for debate on that issue.
Right. I was reading that actually the Israeli government gives people the or Israelis the incentive to move to these settlements by offering them 100,000 shekels, equivalent to 20,000 US dollars, just to move to these settlements in the West Bank, just so they can have a larger population and presence there, which I find kind of disturbing, to be honest.
Well, think about it. It's completely illogical. Here in the United States, would we support people moving in and say, establishing white-only colonies, or black-only colonies? How about we do that in Africa? Oh wait, that already happened in South Africa. It was called apartheid. It was wrong then, and it's wrong today. So saying that these people are allowed to set up Jew-only colonies with roads for Jews and Jews only, and to defend them with assault rifles against children, and this is not hyperbole, it's a simple fact. Israelis have shot and severely injured children in defense of their military-based homelands. It's just absolutely abhorrent. It's morally repugnant. It's disgusting to watch, and I am horrified that it's being done with my tax dollars.
Right, sure, and that's another thing. I didn't even know that until doing some more further research that our tax dollars here were being used to fund um, these kind of these kind of payments as well as the settlements and all of that kind of stuff. I didn't know we were directly paying for that.
It's very much disgusting.
Right, I do agree. So does anyone here? I mean, I see there's a lot of people requesting that other people join, and you have a lot to say. Does anyone want to join? Alma, you spoke yesterday. Um, I don't know if you're talking about clip.
Alex, if I may,
Yeah,
I would like to just clarify one other thing.
sure.
Neil was speaking about Hamas, how he wants to make the focus all about them. Well, Hamas was not only democratically elected in Gaza, but it was a very narrow vote. They weren't. Hamas was not elected in Gaza overwhelmingly as like a massive rush of support and an endorsement of their statements and their beliefs. The vote for Hamas was essentially a protest vote against Fatah because they had failed in their stated objectives of achieving national liberation and independence. In the proportional body of the Palestinian Legislative Council, Hamas won 29 seats to Fatah's 28. So it's a very narrow win.
Right.
Independents, progressives, and leftists took 13 seats. and 6 were reserved for Christians, regardless of their party affiliation. So it, people like to say that Hamas seized control of the Gaza Strip in a coup or an uprising or whatever, but there's just no basis in reality to that. And,
So there was a vote.
There's a lot of
What you're saying there was a vote rather than a seize. Hamas was actually voted into power.
yes, Hamas is the democratically elected representative government of Gaza.
And what do you think of Hamas overall in regards to their actions before the ceasefire, where a lot of what was in the news was human shielding and things of that nature? What's your take on that kind of stuff?
Well, my opinion on Hamas itself isn't really all that important because I'm not a Palestinian and my opinion doesn't really mean much in that regard. But that being said, I do not support terrorism in any way, shape, or form, but I do support resistance by any means necessary, and so does international law. It is very clear that all occupied people have the right to resistance, both non-violently and violently if necessary. Armed resistance is an inalienable right of all people, especially when they're occupied. And Hamas does not initiate hostilities. This is documented by the record of ceasefire violations. Israel has violated really every single ceasefire, and yet we're constantly harped on that Israel wants peace, and if they put down their guns, there would be no Israel, and you know how the rest of the menu goes. But it's just not true.
So you're saying if Israel puts down their guns, is that I'm just confused at what you just ended on. If Israel puts down their guns, there would be no more fighting.
I mean, that's a reasonable assessment, but the common rhetoric that you hear, mostly from people like Benjamin Netanyahu, is if the Palestinians put down their weapons, it would be peace, but if the Israelis put down their weapons, there would be no more Israel. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but Palestinians tried nonviolent resistance, and what has that gotten them? More occupation, more settlements, more people being murdered, more homes bulldozed, over 20,000. And it's just indefensible. From my perspective, this is just completely indefensible. How do you continue defending the occupation, subjugation, and dispossession of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people? It's just it boggles the mind how anybody who calls himself a moral or intelligent person could sit by and think, yeah, everything's just fine. It's those damn Arabs that are the problem. It just boggles the mind.
Right. And in regards to nonviolent actions, what do you think? What's your overall opinion of the wall that's being constructed?
Well, nonviolent actions have been remarkably frequent. In the village of Nabi Saleh, there's a protest constantly. Their land, their homes, and the occupying force comes down and crushes them. And people continue to defend the indefensible. And more than mind-boggling, it's incredibly frustrating because but I'm thankful that we have evidence such as Vonvo where we can speak truth to power and finally get some balance to the discussion.
Right. Okay. I know Max wanted me to actually ask a question. So we were having a conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about Israel's non-compliance with UN law. But at the same time, it was brought up that there's no actual international law that gives the right of return. So what are your feelings on that?
Well, that's simply not true. The UN Declaration of Universal Human Rights states that all people have the right to a nationality, and all people have the right to their homes. That's a simple fact. There's no avoiding that. There's no denying that. You can look it up on the UN website. And it's a matter of fact is that over 750,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes through through an ethnic cleansing campaign and a terrorist campaign by the groups Haganah, Irgun, and various other Jewish terrorist groups. all of those people and their descendants have the legal and moral right to return to their homes and to Palestine. This has been affirmed and upheld by UN Resolution 194, which we spoke about before.
Right. And do you think a major thing that prevents Palestinians from returning home is roadblocks and checkpoints? Because we were speaking to an individual yesterday.
Absolutely. The military occupation as well as the general Israeli government, they have no interest in allowing the right to return. Why? They don't even make any attempt of hiding that. It's because they want to maintain their ethnic and religious majority. They fought damn hard. They fought very hard. They fought very long, and fought very brutally to establish a Jewish majority when they were a minority population. The only way to do that was through ethnic cleansing and destroying it with 500 villages. Well, if I may, the modus operandi of the Haganah during Plan Dalet was they would encircle a village in the dead of night, usually, leaving either the northern or eastern front open. And then they would send troops into the homes and evacuate everybody. These people were forced to flee their homes with nothing but what they could carry on their backs. And then they were sent marching either east to Jordan or north to Lebanon. Then the soldiers would, or I shouldn't even call them soldiers, then the terrorists would loot the homes, whatever they wanted of value or whatever. Then they would destroy them and place mines in the rubble to deter people from returning. They did this systematically. The 500 villages were wiped off the map completely through this process. But you will never hear that on American television.
So, Jimmy, thank you for joining us. Renaud has asked a question. What do you think should be taken to achieve peace?
I think there are a number of things that should be done. I think that they should agree on borders, for example, and they should Israel should stop attacking the Palestinians, of course, and do like inhumane things to them. But the problem is when they shoot rockets from Gaza and stuff. I don't know how to handle that. What the best approach is to that, and I don't have any simple answer to that actually. But they should not do the inhumane thing. They should make sure that Palestinians have water and electricity and stuff like that. Right. And they should treat them fair and dismantle the settlements or make the settlements a part of the Palestinian Authority, for example.
Right, okay.
And then the Palestinians should make peace with Israel and try to live like in two independent states in peace and cooperate.
Right. Okay, and Rafi, can you hear us? That was a yes? Just trying to get everyone back here. Kyle, can you hear us?
Yep, loud.
And Rafi, what about you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
What about me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So what do you want to know about?
We want to know about everything.
Oh.
But
oh, sure.
We were just speaking about.
I thought it was pretty weird. I was listening to this other guy, like as the representative for Israel. It's some NRA kind of Republican gun nut guy talking about how the Palestinians are fake people and stuff. I think it's a little bit Palestinian friends and that they're actual people. I can attest to that.
Of course.
Was there a question that I could address?
Sure. We were just talking about what path do you think should be taken to achieve peace?
I'm personally a fan. I'm personally. So I gotta be quiet. Something like along the lines of what they did in Europe, like a European Union, be a Middle Eastern Union with Israel, Palestine, maybe Jordan, and that would allow people freedom of movement about the whole territory that they consider the place that they're from. Can people hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you fine.
And I think moving in that direction. I mean, obviously something along the lines of a two-state solution in terms of territory, similar to the Geneva Initiative or such things. You know, two states based on the 1967 borders with agreed one-for-one land swaps and what have you. And like Jimmy said, the remainder of settlers, maybe 100,000 people that would be left on the other side, need to become part of the Palestinian state, or they have to come back to our side. I really don't see like how they can live there and say we're citizens of another state and then not cooperate with the place that they live. But also, I mean, regardless of how it ended up that they were brought to this territory, where they religious fanatics or under a policy from a previous generation that thought it was justifiable to take over another territory and move your people in. These people are now living here for second, third generation. This is their community. These are their homes. So, I mean, I'm sort of sympathetic to that side, but also to the Palestinians who want to come back to my side. I'm fine with that also. I don't mind if there's more or less Arabs living near me. It really doesn't bother me.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. And do you just mind introducing yourself quickly?
Yeah.
I know everyone would like to hear a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. My name is Rafi. I grew up in Chicago, or in Skokie, a suburb of Chicago, and I've been living in Israel for about 6 years, in Jerusalem. And I work in biotechnology for a small company making medical diagnostic tests, and I design the software for those. And in my free time, I, participate in peace dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians and that sort of thing. It's a worthwhile cause. I got involved in that in university in Chicago, and I started a group called Jewish Islamic Dialogue, and I read the Quran and I read the Tanakh, and I wanted to see if I could get Jews and Muslims to try to get along and to talk about our commonalities between the culture, and just to meet a lot of people. And I met a lot of Palestinians, and I found they were pretty cool guys. I was always told, oh, these are the boogeymen, they're trying to kick you out of your country and steal your land or whatever it is. And they're just regular people, most of them, just like most Israelis and stuff, just caught in like a political situation. But it's just a bunch of normal people that, like, if this was in the middle of the Midwest, everyone would just get along fine, It's not like there's real enmity. Jews really hate Arabs or Arabs really hate Jews. It's a bunch of nonsense, It's about people who want their freedoms and representation and need to find a way to get that sorted out,
Yeah, I mean, from what we hear, it's more just the extremists. I mean, it's unfortunate that 1, 2, 3, 4% of a population or a sample of a population ends up representing the whole, and kind of that's what you're kind of saying is Israelis as a whole don't really want that, but we hear, or don't really hate Arabs, but we hear that because of the extremists, it seems that they hate Arabs, and
they don't hate Palestinians. I mean, they're also very afraid of. Yeah, I mean, Israelis will tend to think of them as Arab generally over here, like the Palestinians are the people over there, whereas the Arabs are like the Arabs you meet at the grocery store, the Arabs who's your doctor or your mechanic. That's a normal Arab, and then the Arabs that are the Palestinians are like the guys on the outside, and we're like scared of them.
Right.
It's like the Cold War with the communists, like the evil Russians, and they're like malevolent and stuff. But like, if a Russian was living in America, they're like, oh, he's just a normal person,
Right.
Sort of similar like that,
Yeah, it's true. So
when you meet people face to face, it's hard to hate people that you actually know. It's easier to hate people that you can imagine what they're like somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a good point. Definitely a good point. So Kyle, can you still hear us?
Yes.
And So I don't know if you want to respond to anything Rafi has said, but just to keep it fair, do you want to answer the question too? How we can, what path do you think is needed to achieve peace?
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to. First, let me respond to Rafi. I don't think Rafi is a bad guy, but I do think that being in Israel, his perspective is a bit skewed. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees when you're in the forest. And the basic truth of the matter is that the Israeli government is racist. It is shocking how closely it resembles the American South in the years of Jim Crow. I like to say that the Israeli society is about 50 or 60 years culturally behind the United States. They haven't had their civil rights movement. They haven't had their very struggles that other Western-style democracies have to go through in order to achieve equality and independence for all. And not mistaken, for the creation of the State of Israel was a constitution that guarantees equal rights for all, and that there would be no discrimination based on ethnicity, religion, or race. And all of these are routinely violated in a government policy by Israel to this day. And I think, but to answer the question more directly, my opinion on a one-state solution, two-state solution, it doesn't matter. I'm not a Palestinian, I'm not an Israeli, so my opinion really doesn't mean a whole lot. But for what it is, a one-state solution, the state of Palestine, with equal rights granted religion, regardless of religion, and I transition period between transition from peace and ensure that everything's. It's contrary to what so many people say. There's not an intrinsic, nor is there rampant, just inbred anti-Semitism from Palestinians. That's just not true. That's what the extremists on both sides like to leave the discussion at, but it's just not the case.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Rafi, there's some background noise coming from your audio. Is there any way you can cut that out? I believe there's some background noise from your audio.
Rafi, you're saying me?
Yeah, I think it's coming from your video.
Maybe. I don't know how to control. I can't barely hear anybody.
Can you hear me fine?
Really, the internet in Israel sucks, man. It's the second thing I would fix.
Right. Yeah, they're saying it's your audio. There might be someone else in the room with you or something who's speaking or moving around or making.
Oh yeah, no, my wife's in the room. She was on the phone. I told her to try to be quiet.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in Israel now?
Yeah, I'm in Jerusalem in my apartment. You see an American flag behind me. That's just the.
Right. Okay.
I brought that from America. So it was 9/11 flags.
Right. And when did you go back to Israel?
I was born in America, so I immigrated to Israel about 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
When are we in now? So it was like 98, maybe 96.
Okay. So why don't you share some of your experiences of what was happening over the last?
No, 2000.
Right. So since you were there over the last month when things got really chaotic, why don't you describe some of your experiences before the ceasefire and how your daily life was affected by what was going on?
I mean, to be honest, you can be in Israel and be totally in a bubble. You don't need to be aware at all of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And in fact, I find a surprising number of people have absolutely no idea what's going on here. It's really crazy. Like, I came from America, so like I understand what a normal society is supposed to look like, where everyone has equal rights and stuff like that. And people here are like totally in a weird perspective because of this conflict. Like Kyle was saying, they need to have this sort of revolution, this equal rights revolution. But because they have this like question mark over what's going to be with our what even defines where our country ends and where it begins, which people are going to be in it. Everyone's in this like protectionary phase, where they're so like protective of their group of saving Israel. That because I think here like there's discrimination against Arabs in housing and stuff. Although I'm not sure in what neighborhood it is. I know there's Arabs that live in my neighborhood and stuff, and Arabs that live in my parents' neighborhood. But amongst dealing with, once you go past the green line, then the discrimination level just goes through the roof. I mean, there's well, like in reality, most people just sort of get along anyways. You'll have like Arabs sneaking in from the West Bank to go work in places in Israel, and we're all like friends with them anyways, and we know that's like Americans like being friends with illegal immigrants in America. It's like just bizarre, and we just like sort of brush it off, like ignore the situation and be like, oh, hopefully one day it'll get better. But it really is a mess. I mean, that's how I sort of got involved in it, because there's a lot of nice people here, and they really deserve to have a good life and stuff. But like, we have a military occupation over 2 or 3 million people in these territories, and then we have all these like right-wing settlers we put in. It would make sense if we put like the most liberal left-wing Israelis in the settlements and let them live with the Palestinians. That might work. But then we put like the most right-wing Texas Republicans like in the middle of Tijuana. It's just bizarre. And it's very like, even when you talk to other Israelis about like wanting peace with the Arabs, some of them are like, yeah, that's a great idea, I'm all for it. And some of them are like, really like protectionary and like very scared if you're saying, oh my God, you're going to destroy the state of Israel. You can't admit that there's such a thing as Palestinians. It like denies our right to exist.
Well, the problem, Rafi, is that you guys in Israel keep electing...
It's all or something like 1984 style. It's really weird.
You guys keep electing them to... You guys keep electing those extremists to elected office. You've got Benjamin Netanyahu, who gave a speech to Israeli students at a university during the Chinese political crisis. They should have taken that opportunity to go...
What did he say?
That you've got a prime minister right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's openly admitted and bragged about not only derailing the Oslo Accords, but during the Chinese political crisis, he was saying that they should have exploited that opportunity when world focus was on China to go in and expel the rest of the Arabs. That man is now the prime minister of Israel, and he's probably going to win re-election. So you've got the most militant, swaggering bravado and war rhetoric out of the Israeli government, and it really marginalizes more moderate voices from being heard. And if there's going to be change, it has to come from the Israeli side, because it's just not going to work. An occupied people cannot negotiate in good faith. They're occupiers. When their occupiers have nowhere to take the boot off their neck.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, also you have to think that like if Bibi Netanyahu has the Knesset majority, that means he won 25% of the seats, and then just convinced a bunch of other people who have nothing in common with him to join up with him because at least then they'll get to be in charge. And originally the Likud had this idea that their idea was opposed to the idea of creating an independent state. And then slowly they've sort of pretended to come to the reality of everyone else that we need a two-state solution. And they're sort of like, half living in the dinosaurs. And in order to still get votes, they're still like, old people vote a lot more than young people. and they're still sort of like pandering to the crowd that really is against a two-state solution. With really, I mean, very few of them are offering a reasonable alternative. There's maybe like out of the top 20 of Likud, maybe 3 of them support, giving the Palestinian citizenship of Israel and making one state, and the rest of them just support some kind of apartheid. It's really, and at the same time, there's a lot of like emotional conflicts with people because they're like really emotionally attached to Judea and Samaria and all like the historic places that are all over there, and for them they feel like they're traitors unless they stand strong for Israel keeping hold of all these territories, which is it's really not realistic. I mean, if you don't want the people to become part of your country, you can't just take their land, The left wing here is also they can't seem to get it together to put. Yeah, the education it's quite. I mean, I don't really know all the details, but from what I've read about it, they don't like admit that there is Palestinians. It's very pushing the perspective that they want. Like, sort of like the old cowboys and Indians things. Like the cowboys were the good guys and the Indians were like the evil guys. And it took a long time for like America to like come to terms with the fact that they basically conquered the Indians' territories and killed a lot of them and stole most of their land. And the Israelis also. And if you explain that to them, even to like normal Israelis, they don't process it.
Yeah. Kyle, why don't you respond? Why don't we give Kyle a chance to jump in here?
Sorry.
Well, you've also got to take into account that Israel is the most militarized country on the planet. Its level of paranoia is legendary. There is absolutely nothing that does not constitute a threat to Israelis, and it's just disgusting to see some of the propaganda that's inundated into Israeli children. I saw a video of a military exposition of a military museum, I believe it was. There was like an annual military event or whatever in which children take field trips from school or whatever, and they get to see Merkava tanks, they get to play with machine guns and all this stuff. And an Israeli was interviewing these children, and they're openly saying that they're feeling good about imagining Arabs and running them over, and one of them was saying he can't wait to turn 18 to join the military, and when he was asked where he wants to serve, he said Lebanon. The interviewer said, but we're not at war with Lebanon anymore. We left. We gave them back their land. This is not the words of a culture that is teaching nonviolence as a solution. This is not the words of a people who desire peace. These are the words of a people who desire to conquer the other. And it's essentially a gigantic propaganda PR war.
But
it's a generational PR war.
And but Kyle, what would you?
Palestinians are losing on the local level, but on the international level, Palestinian support is only growing.
But Kyle, what would you say to?
I totally agree.
I mean, I agree with that as well, but isn't it kind of the same thing on the other side, where Palestinians and Arabs are being raised the same way? They too are telling their children and being educated to hate Israelis, and I think many children would say the same thing if they were being interviewed and as well.
Well, I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't say that's entirely accurate. But you have to also consider the source and consider the context. These are also the same people whose parents and grandparents were driven from their homes and ethnically cleansed in one of the most brutal actions in world history due to any kind of.
Well, some of them were actually. I mean,
and there has to be uses of moderation, and of course, there's going to be extremists on both sides. And of course, I condemn the extremists on both sides. But you also have to put it in context and understand it from their point of view. These people have been dispossessed, ethnically cleansed, and just completely brutalized for decades, entire generation.
Alex, you are correct, actually, if I may say so, because I read today in a group.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, okay, but I must say that I read in a group today, actually. Okay.
Yeah, we hear you.
Well, I read in a pro-Palestinian group today from a Palestinian that that they said that they wanted peace, but that they couldn't forget their killed martyrs and so on. So they wanted to remind their children about what the Israelis had done to them, and wanted them to learn how to fight and so on. So it's a proof right there in the pro-Palestinian group that Kyle is in and Rafi is in also, that they actually do foster their children to keep the spirit up to fight and so on. And I think that this is a real, actually. Because if I ask any pro-Palestinian, almost any pro-Palestinian, they will have a very hard time to talk about peace. You can ask anyone, you can ask Kyle, you can ask many of these in the room here. Many of them have a hard peace. They will later and say that Israel is not for peace. And the Israelis will say the same about the Palestinians. There's no mutual, unfortunately.
Right.
And that's a big problem.
Right.
Yeah. I think the situation is most similar, in my opinion, to what happened in Ireland, where the Northern Ireland came in here to make a Protestant-only state in Northern Ireland, and they started ethnically cleansing in previous generations, and then all of a sudden, like, the modern world hit them, and they were just paranoid. You know, they were like, holy shit, we did a terrible thing, and, like, there's really, you know, it's hard to back out of it, and instead of, having a civil rights movement in the country, they couldn't deal with the fact having a civil rights movement almost negated their existence, you know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's
They
true.
made two states, and I think it was the benefit of the fact that they had a European Union, that there was a common body that would manage all of Europe for them, so that even if they drew a line somewhere, they weren't like, oh my God, I gave up half my country. Like, you still have all of Europe, you know? You're a European citizen. And I think similarly, they need that sort of comfort zone to be created, you know, sort of a regional union that you could be a citizen of, regardless of which, you know, country within that union you're a citizen of, and, you know, have mutual, you know, protection, I think, or else
But Rafi,
they can't wrap around their minds
We
around
don't need any
type
of
of
these
peace.
things, though.
Kyle, why don't you jump in here, and then Jimmy,
Not?
we'll give you a chance. Kyle, what were you going to say?
Honestly, I don't think that it is. We've got the extremists in Israel who have absolutely no desire for that. We've already got proof positive, and we've already got. It's well documented that Hamas has agreed to recognize the state of Israel. It's also a fact that the preconditions that Netanyahu is about recognizing the Jewish state of Israel that's a very recent phenomenon. It's a very stalling. It's stalling.
Yeah. I think both sides are stalling.
They've got too much.
can I come in? So
With the status quo.
1 second,
Hold
Jimmy.
on, let me finish.
Yeah, let Kyle finish, and then
With
you
the
can go.
status quo, they can continue
Sure.
building their settlements. They can continue going to their gelato cafes. They can continue just living their lives, like living their normal lives, going to the cinemas and having absolutely no problem with what's going on. Most Israelis never see what's going on in the West Bank. Never see the poverty. They never see the absolute horror that Gaza is suffering under. They never have to deal with the consequences of the blockade. All they know, the rockets, Hamas, and how the evil Palestinians just want to push them all into the sea. It's an endless, and it's simply not true. Now, the framework for peace has been established. We've got numerous United Nations resolutions stating unequivocally that Israel must relinquish occupied territory. In UN Resolution 242, the inadmissibility of acquiring land through war. You've got UN Resolution 194, I believe it is, that enshrines the unalienable right of return for all Palestinian refugees. Now, if there was a democratic process in Israel, a democratic system in which all peoples were appreciated and respected, this problem would be over. Allow the right of return, and then allow an open democratic referendum and voting process. And both peoples agree to abide by the result. If there are more Palestinians and they vote for a Palestinian government, so be it. If there are more Israelis and they vote for an Israeli government, so be it. So long as the people are willing to live under the results of that election, I think it should work out just fine. So long as there's a constitution granting equal rights and various other preconditions, but the minutiae can be worked out as the process goes on. We don't need to have all of the answers right now. What we need is honest brokers. We need honest partners. We do not have that in Israel.
All right, why don't we give Jimmy? Jimmy, what were you going to say? And respond to that, please.
The territories, such that, had international support. Idea that there.
Hey, Rafi, I think something that will help with the lag is if you click the turn off camera button above your face, next to the mute button and the report button. It won't, the video won't have to come in. It will just be your audio, and I think that will make it a little less laggy.
Alex, may I respond to Kyle and Rafi?
Yes, please do.
Me?
Yeah, hold on, Jimmy. Hold on, Jimmy.
Rules.
One second, Rafi. I think if you
Kyle.
1 second, Jimmy. Rafi, if you click,
Kyle, you were talking about.
Rafi, if you turn off your camera,
I would just like to say that Hamas actually said in their 25-year anniversary recently that they wouldn't give an inch Israel, that they would never accept Israel's presence. So that goes counter to what you have said, Kyle, even though I know that Hamas representatives have said what you have brought up. But it's like ambiguous what they mean.
Yeah, very much like Bibi.
That's my point to you. I would just like to respond to one thing also to Rafi before I would just like to say about Ireland that in Ireland, so they stopped fighting after the English government, I think it was, let what needs to be done in Gaza and so on, because Hamas and Fatah join ranks and they want to hold the rifle together. They said recently they want to join together and fight against peace. Hamas wants Fatah to stop trying to make peace with Israel. They shouldn't.
Well, Jimmy, that's pure baloney, first of all. A poll was released by the Near East Consulting Institute of Ramallah that was taken just shortly after Hamas won election. And it found of Palestinians in Gaza, including 77% of Hamas voters, peace agreement with Israel based on 2 states for 2 people, while 86% want Mahmoud Abbas to remain president. 73% of respondents believe that Hamas should change its position on the elimination of the State of Israel. So clearly, like I referenced before, I don't believe you were here for it. Palestinians in Gaza voted for Hamas not because they like Hamas, but it was a protest vote against Fatah. So your assertions against Hamas have some legitimacy, but they're not representative or indicative of the Palestinian people's opinion as a whole. Not so. I'd really appreciate it if you don't use that as a red herring to further divide the discourse.
I'm not trying to use it as a red herring. I would like to see the link actually, if you could give it to me. Okay. That's good news.
It is good news.
I'm very glad to hear that, Kai.
Jimmy, can you explain what Carl is saying?
I don't know what he's referring to, but I know that I have seen one poll showing that more than 50% of Palestinians want a two-state solution and peace. But I don't know otherwise. The poll he's referring to, I've never seen that.
Okay.
Well, Jimmy, you're also going to have to recognize one undeniable truth, and that any two-state solution based on the 1967 borders is giving up 78% of historic Palestine to Israelis. They are willing to compromise on 22% of what is theirs. 22%. Do you think that's an equitable or fair allotment of resources and territory for the number of people involved in the two sides? I don't. I think a two-state solution is involved in person.
I can say that it's fair, but have happened, and the result has become this. I don't know how Israel could have, for example, the UN division of the former mandate, where Israel had 55% and Palestine had 40%. I don't know how that would be possible to do today. That would be the most sort of fair division that I can think of. But that's not possible today because the Arab states and the Palestinians want to eliminate Israel. So I don't know how that is possible. So then maybe this 78% is more. It's okay at least.
I've presented my ideal solution for the problem, and I like to think that it's a lot more rational than simply herding Palestinians into Bantustans in the West Bank, keeping it disconnected from East Jerusalem and Gaza, and saying, "Hey, look, we gave you land," when it's not Israel's to give in the first place.
Well, Kyle, I don't support the settlements, so.
No, but you support the state of Israel, which is a settlement.
But Alex, now you see what I meant before when I wanted you to ask Kyle about if he accepted Israel's existence.
Yes, I do.
Now you can see that he thinks that the whole of Israel is...
every inch of Israel is Palestine.
Yeah, well, that's where we fundamentally disagree, Kyle.
I mean, I'd agree that Israel and Palestine are really the same place. You know, I can tell you that from my perspective.
Geographically,
Let's give Rafi a chance. He hasn't spoken in a couple minutes. Rafi.
geographically they're the same place, but they're worlds apart.
I mean, from my perspective, Israel and Palestine are the same place in a way. There was the British Mandate of Palestine as of 1922 when they took Jordan, made a state that's now Jordan. The remainder of that area, which is called Palestine, was designated to be either made into a Jewish state originally, that was a democratic state that had a Jewish majority, if that was possible, which in the end it didn't turn out that was realistic. And then demographics, they just said it'll be one state and this part will be another state. And wherever the people were, whichever state the people had them to be in, that's which they would get. I mean, it's possible that they could give back a large number of the desert, which the Palestinians aren't really so interested in, which makes up about half of the state of Israel in the first place. But I think the realistic solution is some way that they could share the entire thing, because we're talking about a very small area. Something, there's maybe the size of Luxembourg in European terms, or the size of New Jersey in American terms. It's not really practical for as an individual living here who wants personal freedom. I mean, I came from a place where I could drive for 20 hours in every direction and I'd still be in my own country. And here I drive 10 minutes in 3 directions and I'm out of my country. And the same things with Palestinians. I mean, we're both trapped by the situation, in a sense, in a very small area. And I think Israelis need to accept the fact that they consider all of Israel Palestine, and Palestinians, they consider that is, for most Israelis, they'll consider all of what they call Palestine to be Israel. And that's just sort of the perspective on here. And in terms of realistic political terms, they have to come to some kind of solution. But there needs to be sort of
Proposing a one-state solution. You think that is?
I'm in favor of a confederation solution, where you would have like maybe a mini European Union style arrangement between you, like make a state of Israel and a state of Palestine. Based along the welcome to go to Palestine. The Palestinians welcome to. They could have economic cooperation, share all their natural resources, have a shared currency. So in a way, like the same way, like the European Union is kind of like one federated country, but also they have their separate states. You can still have your separate passport. So find a middle ground, I think, between a 2-state and a 1-state, I think is the real solution. Because, I mean, on one hand, the majority of both sides prefer the 2-state solution over war, obviously, but there's a solid minority on each side that doesn't want to give up the whole thing, that would prefer to have the entire country. And even those that are, that support a 2-state solution, a large number of them are sort of emotionally attached to the rest of the land, really on both sides. And we're not talking about a huge swath of territory here. You can drive across the entire thing. Governmental unit like the European Union that represents them both equitably together. Sort of a federal solution, I guess.
Right. But then where do you draw the line between borders? How does that work in regards to borders?
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of borders along the lines of the Geneva Initiative. You just do one where Israel can annex the nearby border settlement blocks that are without causing too much damage to the Palestinian state, and in exchange they can get empty territories of the state of Israel or areas that used to have Palestinian villages that could be rebuilt, and create 2 states. But there's certainly going to be Israelis left over in the Palestinian state. But there's also Palestinians that want to come over to the Israeli state. So I think they can make an exchange. You let them in. I think things can be done. You can also have areas of shared, joint administration for certain areas of the federal capital for everybody, and not have You know, oh, this is my side of Jerusalem. The block is my. It's a bit silly. You know, it's sort of like going to be like Berlin if you try to make it two countries and draw a wall in the middle of a city where right now people can travel freely across. You know, that's sort of the nightmare scenario as someone who lives in Jerusalem that they're concerned about. They're like, I don't want a wall in the middle of my town. It's ridiculous. You know, I can't go across the street now. I'm in another country. It's really weird. But I think you could draw a line, and then, you know, but you'd have to have it within the framework of an arrangement where you'd still be allowed as a person to cross the line and to go to the other side. You know, we're not putting up an iron curtain. You know, sort of a line that you have in the back of your phone book or something. This is one district, that's another. Everyone can carry on and enjoy their lives like normal people.
All right. So then, why don't you answer Renard's question about if Israel should get rid of the wall, and then Kyle, I'll give you a chance to speak.
Sure.
Me?
Yeah. Why? Yeah.
I think that would be fantastic if we got rid of the wall. I would like to see the people feel like they're comfortable. I mean, in order to do that, I mean, you'd really have to have the majority of people on both sides say we've permanently rejected violence as our resolution for our problem. And also the Israelis, though, where they've really discussed the terms of what these states are going to be, so people are comfortable. We're not just taking down the wall and then, you know, we're still going to keep a huge number. Israel's going to keep a ton of the Palestinians' territory, or the Palestinians are still going to forever, you know, want to conquer all of Israel and rename it Palestine. Both sides have to be sort of comfortable with me. Tearing down the wall would be fantastic. I mean, it's ridiculous. I have friends in Bethlehem and Ramallah and Hebron, and they're like 15 minutes away from me, and I can't even go there. I need to get a visa to come here, to go there. They can't go to their house. I'd rather we could all just go to dinner together, whatever, you know, live like regular people, normal country. But it's a tough situation. You know, obviously people don't want to get killed on both sides.
Right. So do you believe the wall, roadblocks, and the checkpoints, are they more for control? Is Israel trying to control Arabs and Palestinians, or is it preventing terror?
I think it's hard to know where one thinks the other one begins. Like, you know, on one hand, Israeli society was really freaked out after the Intifada. I mean, I lived in Jerusalem when they were blowing up cafes, and I had friends who were shot and stabbed, and it's pretty messed up, you know? Yeah. And that sort of, like, emotionally scarred the Israelis, really, and, like, made Palestine, like, a dirty word to a lot of Israeli people. And, you know, getting over that, I mean, that was sort of the impetus to building the wall. And even at the time, I thought that, like, the Israelis instigated the Palestinians and you know, derailed the peace talks just so they could get away with doing that, you know, and to take further control and put the ball more in their court. So I think, in a way, you're saying where they wanted to convince the IRA, or in this case the Hamas and the PLO, that Israel was totally in control and that, you know, resistance is futile, so to speak, you know, that there's no way they could win. We put a 30-foot concrete wall that's, you know, 5 feet thick. There's no way you can mess with us. You want to have peace with us, you can talk to us, you know, you have our number. But I think it was making a tough play on their negotiating strategy, you know.
Right. Okay. Fair answer. Kyle,
politics.
Kyle, before you left, what did you want to say?
I was just going to reinforce that rather than a confederation, rather than more walls, rather than more people, more foreigners coming and outsiders coming in and dictating what needs to happen and who goes where and what happens, I think what we need is I prefer a one-state solution. I think the state of Israel is a massive and almost unparalleled historical ground. And it needs to be, the facts on the ground have changed, obviously. There are, 6 million Israelis now who live there, and many of them are second or third generation. Their entire lives are based there. So it's not realistic to say everybody in Israel leave, go home, get out. But at the same time, it's also not realistic to say, well, everybody that we dispossessed, sorry, tough luck, better luck next time. That's just not going to work. So I think the only equitable solution is a one-state solution, the state of Palestine, with a constitution that grants and guarantees equal rights for all, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, or religion. And Israel was supposed to be that. That was supposed to be that country. But obviously, when you create a state of for Jews, you're not going to be very religious or ethnically egalitarian.
Okay. Jimmy, you have anything to add? Are you still with us?
Yeah, I would like to respond to Kyle actually.
Please do.
Yeah, I am. Well, recently I saw that there was a news reporter who actually was shooting the rockets from Gaza. And it seemed like, to a large extent, it was not actually Hamas that shot the rockets. Instead, Hamas actually stick to us fairly well. But it was outside groups from were shooting the rockets at Israel. These groups obviously don't care about peace, and they don't care about neither the people of Gaza or and so on. So that's that outside influence that wants to derail the peace process can come in and do this so easily. They can shoot rockets from Gaza that provokes a response from Israel, and then the whole peace situation is derailed.
You've got the entire narrative wrong, Jimmy. All of it. Not a word of what you've said is accurate.
Okay. Can you...
First of all...
Can you disprove that?
There are no outside Iranian groups operating there and firing rockets from Gaza. Second of all, Iran has no interest in destabilizing the region further. They have every interest in a regional peace. They've stated that quite clearly. In fact, my stated one-state solution is heavily influenced by the words and the solution that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad stated in the interview, the part that was cut out from American TV audiences. And thirdly, it is not Hamas rockets or rockets from Gaza that, quote, provoke a response. It is the rockets that are the response. They are the response to Israeli incursions, blockades, assassinations, and murder. They are the result of Israeli actions in Gaza that prompt the retaliatory rockets. Israel does not get to retaliate to retaliation. That's not how it goes. It goes A, B, C, and you're ignoring the A. You're only focusing on B and C, and it's intellectually dishonest, and it's just not accurate.
Jimmy?
No, Kyle. Kyle, I'm not trying to be dishonest here. I'm trying to quote a real news source. I'm not trying to be dishonest in any way, not intellectually or in a way. No, I forgot what I was going to respond to you, but there was a group. I don't remember the exact name of the group now, but they seem to be funded by Iran. I can't remember the abbreviation at the moment, but there was a 3-letter abbreviation of a group in Gaza, and they were shooting rockets. Were funded by Iran. That's not intellectually dishonest or anything. From a news source I saw many days ago. I saw it, and they were investigating who shot the rockets.
It's conjecture. There's absolutely zero evidence of any Iranian cells operating in Gaza. Zero.
I mean, there are Iranian funding or
shit.
helping fund local Gaza militants to attack Israel, but it's not that Iran is brainwashing them to want to fight Israel. These people want to fight Israel anyways. They're just looking for an investor, and Iran has enough money and enough weaponry, so, Iran's like, sure, I'll give you some weapons, you got some cash, we'll make a deal. I mean, it's not like Iran is initiating their attacks. I would say it's not so fair to say that, but there is Iranian financial support of some of this.
Iranian financial and weapon support, however negligible to Gaza, is in no way. It's not in any way any more immoral or any more wrong or any more right or virtuous than the U.S. constantly arming Israel to the teeth and protecting it internationally at the UN Security Council. There's no difference whatsoever. The only difference is in the minds of people who want to make Hamas and Palestinians the bad guy. And valiant for Israel is just defending themselves from these foaming at the mouth Arabs who want to push them into the sea. And it's still not true. It's just a false, phony narrative that's being drummed up to generate sympathy for the Israelis. I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan of blaming the victim.
Oh, Kyle.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Kyle, now I remember what I was going to respond to you also. You're saying that these rockets from Gaza are a response to Israel's attacks on Gaza. And
Yes,
the thing about
because
that is
Israel
that
violates
if they were resisting, yeah, okay, I can see that they violate ceasefires. But the thing is that if you want to respond to an attack, then you would attack the attacker, right?
You do what you're able to. Gazans don't have
No, but
F-16s
Kyle,
that you did to them.
who would you shoot a rocket to if you want yourself? If you wanted to defend yourself, that.
Well, I'm very sorry, Jimmy, but I don't think people in Gaza have the capability to engage in dogfights over Gaza and the Mediterranean in fighter jets. America gifts that stuff to Israel. They don't gift it to Hamas. They don't gift it to the people of Gaza. What do? They impose further financial terrorism against them. This is so complete and disproportionate, and you want to blame the guys for fighting back as being morally retarded. It's almost boggling my mind here. How are you seriously going to sit there and argue that Hamas is the bad guy for doing everything that they can in their power to defend themselves and the people from Israeli aggression and their onslaught? It requires a complete suspension of logic.
Kyle, they're not defending themselves, so they want to. I mean, to defend themselves, why don't they build better shelters? I mean, what are they gonna achieve by sending rockets towards us?
How can they build shelters? All of the building materials are blocked by the blockade. How can they build the infrastructure? Nothing's allowed.
They get so much from their. They get so much from their smuggle tunnels.
Well, yeah, they do have some shelters, but I mean, that's a necessity.
Yeah, so why can't they get the materials that way?
Fire and run and hope the best. Because they, first of all, Jimmy, why should they have to? What in the world makes you think that it's okay that they're resorting to smuggling tunnels? What? The entire premise is flawed and messed up, wrong.
I don't think they should have
using that to justify.
Well, there's some problems here. I'm not saying for sure that a blockade is the right thing. I'm not saying that. I don't know what the right response is to Hamas is being elected, actually. But I can imagine them being not blockaded. I mean, that seems fair. Yeah, okay. But the thing is that the right response to rocket fire from Gaza is to first of all stop the rocket, and the second of all is to not shoot the rockets at the civilians in Israel, because the civilians in Israel haven't been shooting at them. It's the Israeli military.
You're still not getting it. You're still not getting it. You're blaming the rockets. The rockets are the symptom. They are not the cause. They are not root of the problem. They are not the sickness. They are the symptom. If you want rockets to stop, you have to stop the conditions that force their hand. Stop the blockade. Stop the occupation. Treat Palestinians like human beings. That's not asking too much, and that's just a starting point to begin negotiations.
Kyle, now you changed your story. Now you changed what was A and what was B and what was C, right?
I didn't change.
Before anything. You said that it was the. Yeah, you did. No, you said that the rest of Gaza with the rockets. You said that the response with the rockets from Gaza was Israel shooting missiles, right? But now you changed that story.
Kyle, why don't
any story? The only thing that's changed is your understanding.
Kyle, why don't you answer Max's question? Do you think if the solution as you proposed, end the occupation, end the blockades, do you think if that's a sign, do you think that would lead to a sign of weakness by Israel, which would promote the Palestinians and Hamas to kind of to take it as a sign of weakness and continue firing rockets, and really that's their time to go in there and take over the area?
No, because I don't think the Palestinians or the people in Hamas have any delusions or beliefs that they have a credible military option in terms of defeating Israel, which is the fourth most powerful military in the planet. I don't think it's just not. It's not physically feasible. It's not possible. What needs to happen is Israel needs to make a gesture of good faith. They need to end the conditions that force the retaliatory responses of rockets. What's interesting is people like Jimmy and others will completely ignore the Palestinian death during ceasefires that not only justify but necessitate a response.
Right.
Because it's a sign of weakness on the Palestinians' part in Gaza. It's a sign of weakness on Hamas's part to not respond when their people are being murdered in cold blood. But they're continuing to. And furthermore, I think it's pretty well established that they are more than willing to develop and work towards peace. This is referenced by Ahmed al-Jabari, his long-term truce that he had just finished negotiating with Israel. What did they do? They blew him up. They drone bombed his car from the sky. Tell me, how do you respond to that? How do you respond to somebody piloting a remote-controlled drone and murdering you from 20,000 feet in the sky? What's the military response? What's the diplomatic response? What are the Palestinians supposed to think? What are they supposed to do? What exactly are their options?
But like you say,
such an imbalance.
But you say there's a response, there's a reaction for every action. Isn't that just Israel's reaction to a terrorist action? They quote unquote killed the terrorists. That's how they see it.
Israel's the one initiating the action. They're the ones initiating the action. There's an excellent article in the Huffington Post entitled "Reigniting Violence: How Do Ceasefires End?" And it states unequivocally, with plenty of documentation from Israeli sources and others, that it is overwhelmingly Israel who violates the ceasefires. They'll make a raid in Gaza. They'll kill some people. They'll do their things all in the name of security, of course, because we all know that's the blanket justification for killing people. And that will trigger a response from the militant groups in Gaza. So you've got the cause, which is Israeli attacks, blockades, incursions, assassinations, etc. Then you've got B, you've got the Palestinian response. And then you've got C, you've got Israel's response to the response. You see how it works? They only focus on the B and the C. They never tell you about the A. And even if they do, it's never in the headlines. You have to read through the article, you have to search for it in response to an Israeli raid. The rockets came in response to, the rockets came, etc., etc. I can go on and on about
And
this.
when you say when you say they, when you say they who write these articles, who are you referring to? They don't tell you. Who are you referring to?
Western media in general. Anybody, BBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox, anybody in the mainstream media said basically. Nobody is going to give you an unbiased, impartial view of the conflict because Israel has employed so many groups to scrub the media. You've got the ADL looking for anti-Semitism under Iraq. You've got Camera. You've got Jewish Voice for Peace, who's still very Zionist, but at least they're working towards a settlement. You've got all these different watchdog groups who constantly watch the media, send threatening emails to editing reporter goes off narrative. It's well known that Israel's the political third rail of the country, but it's also the journalistic third rail. You cannot deviate from the given narrative, or your career is over.
Right, but Jimmy, but let me just say one more thing. But then, where do you see in the news?
Isn't this very similar to the?
Let me just say one more thing, Jimmy. But then, where do you see in the news that Hamas uses schools and hospitals and playgrounds as missile launch sites and use human shielding? I mean, it goes both ways.
My perspective is that the Hamas is sort of defending themselves, but from their mentality, their idea is they're defending themselves against the Nakba from 65 years ago. The majority of people in Gaza are not really from Gaza anyways. Like, all their grandparents are from everywhere between there and Tel Aviv. And from their idea is they got all these people they don't really know, say that they're Jewish, came in, chased them into Gaza, and all they know is they've been kicked out of most of their land. You know? And so even if Israel would calls a ceasefire, they don't consider that it's peace yet. That it's not peace for them until they get to go back to Jaffa or Ashkelon. So it's very difficult to work with that when the Israeli side is, okay, we'll give you a two-state, but in the two-state, you million point some amount of people are stuck in this tiny neighborhood of Gaza, or not tiny, but it's not much bigger than Manhattan, and it's got a pretty big population, and that would like to be connected to the rest of the country. I mean, most of those people are from other parts of Israel, and they got relatives in Israel in the West Bank territories, and they're trapped, and they don't even have good terms to go to Egypt. So they're defending themselves from their lives. Their whole existence is shitty, So it's hard to say that it's sort of like what Kyle is saying, but this at the same time, as an Israeli, how do you deal with that? I know that you're really upset that your grandparents were kicked out of their house, and now you're stuck in this place, and there's been a military conflict, and tons of people are dead, and you're probably traumatized from having shit blown up everywhere you go. I mean, it's like walking into the wrong part of a prison or something. It's just these people grew up in a rough neighborhood, and they've got to walking into a rough neighborhood in the south side of Chicago. It's a dangerous town, and it's hard to say, okay, we'll stop shooting at you. That's not good enough for them. It's only good enough when Israel just stops to be, and they don't know how to handle that. And you could say that's a fanatical position, but it's really not that fanatical. I mean, their grandparents really did come from Yavna and Ashkelon and Ashdod, and they don't know how to cope with that. I think somebody needs to, have a perspective, either like what Kyle was saying is we're going to make one state and everyone's going to be equal, or we're going to make two states and we'll find a way to share everything together. It's got to be one of those options in a package that gets people to finally relax, I think. or else it's not really going to stop. It's not about, oh, Israel shot this one more school and this guy got killed and they shot some more rockets. I mean, this is like recent news. The story is 65 years old now. It's a long-term conflict. And, trying to backscale, previously in this week, Israel shot a rocket and killed a kid. The week earlier, though, they killed 2 more people of our guys. It's irrelevant. It's already built up on, 6 wars later and, nearly 1 million people displaced and lots of people dead. It's hard to, come to terms with that.
Well, I think we're not exactly at an impasse, but we have reached a point in the discourse where we have to be realistic. We have to be honest, and we have some integrity. And when we've got people who are almost completely unwilling to admit or acknowledge that Israel's committing any wrongdoing, when you've got people who are so hardline in favor of the oppressor over the oppressed, it's just unequivocal that solution has to be, there has to be a solution for all involved. And when you've got people like Jimmy who will, no matter what point you bring up, he will find a way to spin Israel's favor. I know this from personal experience. It is always Israel defending itself, always Hamas that's responsible. It's always somebody else's fault. Israel is never to blame. And you cannot work with people like that. You just cannot. They're not productive to the cause.
Kyle, but doesn't it go both ways?
In favor of the Palestinian side.
Kyle. Kyle.
Keep in mind,
Can I respond?
Occupied people. He's defending
1 second, Jimmy.
occupying people. There's little equivalency there.
Right. All right. Let Jimmy respond.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kyle. I mean, when I've asked you about how to make peace, you will say that the occupiers can't make the occupied. Wait. Let me rephrase this so it's good English here.
Yeah.
You say that the occupied people can't make peace with the occupiers. That's what you say.
No,
meaning that the Palestinians can't make peace with the Israelis.
That's not what I say. What I say is it is incumbent upon the occupier to make peace. It is not incumbent upon the occupied to make peace.
Yeah, but that's the same thing. I mean, how does it work? That means that the Palestinians doesn't have to make peace with the Israelis?
No, that's not what it means. What it means is Israel needs to be the one to make peace. They need to be the ones to reach out their hands, be the ones to offer something. They need to put something on the table. They need to make an offer. They need to try. They need to actually try. And so far, they seem completely unwilling to do so.
You don't think Israel has tried to make peace at all, Kyle?
But Kyle, I mean, I think...
No, not at all, Alex. Not even remotely. They have peace. Why would they? It benefits them. They're gobbling up more and more Palestinian land every day. Their economy is growing every day. Life is good for Israelis. Life is good. They can go to their gelato cafes. They can go read the newspaper and sip a cappuccino. Nobody will ever know different. No, nobody will ever be the wiser. Meanwhile, the Palestinians in Gaza, they're waiting for 80% of them are dependent on foreign aid just to eat, just to survive. And this is so completely black and white. There's no moral equivalency. And when you're defending the occupied and oppressed people, there's no moral equivalency to people making excuses for the occupier.
Rafi, what do you think?
But Kyle, I mean, I agree, of course, that
Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
Respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that, of course, I think that Israel should also make peace with Palestinians. But I mean, I would like like to see both sides. Like when I ask you, it's like it's only Israel that is supposed to be the one trying to make peace. But when you look at almost conflict, almost every conflict, almost without exception, the fact is that the stronger party usually gets some sort of white flag from the weaker party. So it's the weaker party that waves the white flag and want to make peace, right? It's not the other way around.
Not making peace. That's
but why isn't that the case here?
You want Palestinians to surrender.
Yeah, sure. Surrender.
But that's never going to happen. I'm going to repeat that. That is never going to happen.
Why not?
And even because the Palestinians are the ones who are in the right.
Why not?
Right and wrong are what determine conflicts, not might. Might does not make right. If that's the case, is right to be occupied, subjugating and bombing the crap out of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Mali. If that's the case, all of those things are right, and we're doing the right thing. We're being good guys. We're the good guys, and people who are resisting us are the bad guys. That's not how it is in the real world. Palestinians are the occupied people. They are the ones who are being victimized. Israelis are the ones who are occupying them. They are the victimizers. They are the ones who are exploiting and killing them. There is no equivalent. I
get your point, Kyle. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can I just add that I recognize what you're saying, but what I mean is that if Palestinians to sort of surrender, if you want to call it, they would actually be able to have borders, for example, if they make peace with Israel, I mean. They would have borders, and that would mean that all the settlements of Israel, all the settlements that Israel has in the West Bank would become illegal. They wouldn't be able to have them anymore.
They already are.
Or they would have to solve that problem somehow, for example. They would have to either incorporate the settlements. Okay, you say that, but they are not. Israel can use a sort of loophole right now to say that the settlements are legal. They can claim that now because there's no peace. Since were to make peace, they would solve this problem.
Whatever they want, but
this problem would be over.
Yeah, well, under if you're being
technical,
but
this would solve the problem.
But that doesn't make it true.
Yeah, but this would solve this problem once and for all. And also,
it would because what you're asking for is for Palestinians to legitimize the occupation. You're asking them to basically say, yeah, you get the bigger guns, you win. What are you going to let us have? You want the Palestinians
that
to
Israel is the occupation
table and then be thankful for it. And it's just not real. It's just not realistic. It's not.
But what you're saying is but Kyle, you're saying that they shouldn't show presence at all. That's what you're saying.
You skipped your audio skipped. I didn't understand you. What did you say?
Can you repeat that, Jimmy?
He's saying that you are.
Sorry. It sounds like trying to say that Israel is an occupation. It's not. He doesn't just mean that the settlements are an occupation. The whole of Israel is an occupation, as I see it, and he wants the Palestinians to keep fighting until it goes away. That's how I interpret Kyle.
You're very wrong. I don't want them to keep fighting. I don't want them to have to keep fighting. But I want them to do whatever they have to do to protect themselves. That's the difference. I don't want Hamas to attack Israel. I want them to defend themselves. And I don't want Israel to attack Gaza. I want Israel to protect themselves from a legitimate threat, from a legitimate violence. But oppressors, colonizers, do not get to protect and to defend themselves against the people they're colonizing, against the people that they're occupying. bank robbers do not get to keep their money even just because they get away. They're still wrong. You do not get to keep the stuff that you take when you kick somebody's door in, even if you get away with it. It's still wrong. And if you get caught, you have to give it back. Israel, everything, every single inch of what Israel has, they've taken. So by moral and legal obligations, they have no right to an inch of Palestine. But Palestinians have already conceded 78% of what was once 100% theirs. There is no...
Okay,
not
Kyle,
all Palestinians conceded to 78%. That's the issue. At least a good number of them are still
doesn't matter if
willing to
they've
fight
conceded
to
or
give
not.
it all. Well, I mean, if you legally speaking, Israel, the state within the 67 borders, is a state that's recognized by the United Nations. You can invade it. They can say that they can try to claim a right to move back there, but they can't destroy the country. And that's another story. But I don't know. I think there's two things going on.
You're using the word destroy intentionally. Destroying.
I think they want a military conquest of the state of Israel. But I mean, it's not everyone. Obviously, the number of Palestinians accept it.
But Kyle,
Yes, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just going to say that at least 7%, you have to agree that at least 7% have to be legal under any circumstances. They must be legal for Jews to have. So at least 7%. You have to agree to that at least, right?
I'm not sure I understood what you said. 7% what?
Well, I mean that the Jews owned 7% back in 1947. They owned 7% of the land. So you have to see that.
No, nobody's
right?
disputing that. Nobody's disputing that. Jews have always had a historical presence in Palestine, but they have always been a minority population. That does not entitle them majority rights or majority land. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't.
Sure, but I want to question on that. What do you think about the UN decision in 1947? I mean the vote there to country 45%. What do you think about that vote? Was it legal or not?
Regardless of whether or not it was legal, it's ridiculous. How are you going to offer 55% of the land to a minority population? You'd be stupid to accept that coming from a Palestinian perspective. You'd be an idiot. Why would you give away more than half of what is yours to a minority population? It just doesn't even it's completely illogical.
It's a random designation, though.
The Arabs were rejections. What's that?
It was kind of a random designation. I mean, it was 55% of 20% of the original mandate, which is, 2% of the entire Arab world. From their perspective, it was relatively low inhabited place in Europe, and they thought that they were being prejudiced against. So they were like, why don't we move a couple million Jews to Palestine, and we'll be the majority, and we'll have like a democratic country. I mean, maybe it was foolhardy, maybe it was, responsible, but I don't think it was such like, European settlers wanting to come to America. They're like, oh, we'll come to America and set up colonies. Obviously that sort of thing causes a lot of trouble we see in the long run. But I don't think it was like, we're better than everyone else.
Rafi, in order for that to be true, you would have to ignore all of the Zionist history and all of the Zionist objectives in the first place. Not to mention, you would also have to ignore the ethnic cleansing campaign of Landalet. You would have to ignore the massacres, many massacres that occurred, like Deryat. You would have to ignore a lot of history to believe that the Israelis, the Jews, them, just happened to haphazardly stumble upon a 55-45% split. I mean, that's not amicable for anybody. It's a minority population getting the majority of the land. There's no two ways about it.
But not necessarily. They were dividing into two districts. Well, within the state there was a Jewish majority. There were 500,000 Jews and 400,000 Arabs, and it was not going to be just the Jew state. It was the state of those 500,000 and 400,000 people living in that territory. It was dividing an existing piece of land that had people living to it into two political districts, saying you have one shared capital, you can each have a separate parliament, which can have a cooperative arrangement between the two and have a shared economy. People would be able to travel from one side of the line to the other, but you would each be two political states. That made the Jewish people wanted a representative for the UN. This was their way to get some kind of international representation, to divide this land into two states where everyone would stay in their house, in theory. I mean, obviously they were on the side planning to conquer the territory in case the Arabs didn't want to be cooperative, and the Arabs probably thought these guys are coming in to take everything over, and the rest is history.